There are paths we walk every day without thinking. We assume these areas are public land that belongs to everyone. For Nyla Carter, a second-grade teacher in Glenvale, the path behind the old warehouse was one of those areas. She walked that path without incident for 2 years, until the day Officer Rick Branson decided she shouldn't be there. What Branson didn't know was that Nyla's sister Maya wasn't just an emergency room trauma nurse. She was a Delta Force veteran with 10 years of special operations experience, including advanced K9 training and joint operations with military working dogs. When Branson released the German Shepherd Thor to scare Nyla, using aggressive barking and lunges to scare a woman walking home on public property, he started a confrontation that would expose a pattern of racist harassment, cost him his career, and lead to federal prison time. Because Maya Carter had spent a decade learning to control the most dangerous situations in the world, and she was about to teach Officer Branson exactly what happens when you threaten the people she loves. A lot would come out. The afternoon sun lit up Glenvale's quiet streets as Nyla Carter adjusted the straps of her heavy backpack filled with second-grade spelling tests she had to grade that evening. She was 28 years old and had been teaching for 6 years. On her way home, she passed through the residential neighborhood, walking past Mrs. Patel's house with its immaculate garden. Nyla was quietly humming to herself. Her phone vibrated in her pocket with a message from her sister Maya. "I'm working the night shift in the ER. There's lasagna in the fridge. I love you," it read. Nyla smiled and quickly replied, "Thanks, sis, see you tonight." Maya had been her rock since their parents died 8 years ago. Her sister, 10 years older, had returned home from the military to help Nyla finish college. While Nyla became a teacher, Maya continued her career as an emergency room nurse. They shared a small house 3 blocks from the elementary school. "Be careful on the road, dear," a familiar voice called out. Divya Patel was standing on her porch, having climbed a small ladder to adjust something above her door. The 68-year-old retired teacher was as fit and active as ever, her gray hair neatly combed back, her reading glasses dangling from a chain around her neck. "I'm installing my new doorbell camera," said Mrs. Patel. "Now I can see who's coming before I open the door, and it records everything. My son insisted I get it." "That's wonderful," Nyla replied warmly. "Technology keeps us safe." "It really does, but I miss the days when we knew our neighbors." Mrs. Patel smiled. "Have a nice walk home, dear. I'll wave to you when you come back." Nyla continued walking toward the easement path, her footsteps crunching on the gravel. The path was clearly marked by a weathered sign: "Public service right-of-way, open access." When a friend had asked if she was sure the path was legal, she had taken a photo of it once. The city planning office had confirmed it. This was public land, maintained for drainage and public services, open to pedestrian access. The creek flowed gently beside the road, and a cardinal sang from an oak tree. Nyla paused to watch it, thinking about how she would tell her second-grade class about local birds in Monday's lesson plan. The second graders would love to learn this. The low hum of the engine broke her thoughts. A white police car slowly made its way down the residential street, running parallel to the road. Nyla could see 2 police officers through the windshield. One was older with a stern jawline, the other younger and clearly more uncomfortable. The car stopped. Both doors opened. "Good day, ma'am," said the older officer, his tone sharp enough to make Nyla's stomach clench. His badge read Branson. "May I ask what you're doing on private property?" Nyla felt shock before fear. "I'm walking home. This is a public road. I use this road every day." Officer Rick Branson approached, his hand resting comfortably on his belt. He was in his early 40s, with the physique of someone who spent time at the gym and the demeanor of someone accustomed to unquestioning obedience. "This is industrial property. You're trespassing." He pulled out a small notebook and opened it. "I need to see your ID." "Officer, this road is clearly marked as public." Nyla took out her phone, opened her photos, and showed him the sign she had photographed. "See, the city says. Don't argue with me, ma'am. I know what's public and what's not, and I'm telling you that you're trespassing." The young police officer, his name tag read Drummond, shifted uncomfortably. "Rick, maybe we should confirm with headquarters what the sign says. Are you questioning my decision, Drummond?" Branson snapped, his voice so sharp it startled his partner. "Because I'm really sick of rookies who think they know everything better." Drummond remained silent, but the look on his face clearly showed his discomfort with the situation. Branson walked toward the back door of the patrol car, and Nyla heard him before she saw him. A deep, aggressive bark that instantly quickened her heartbeat. The German Shepherd that emerged was enormous, at least 176 pounds of muscle and teeth. According to the K9 unit markings on the patrol car, his name was Thor, and his entire body language screamed aggression. Ears forward, fur bristling, Branson held him with practical ease while pulling hard on his leash. "Ma'am, I need you to comply with my instructions," said Branson, his voice taking on a rehearsed, official tone. "My K9 partner needs to verify that you are not carrying contraband on industrial property." "I'm a second-grade teacher," Nyla said, her voice louder than she intended. A real, undeniable fear now gripped her. I have spelling tests in my backpack, that's all. Please, I just want to go home. She took a step back, and Thor lunged forward, barking explosively. Branson extended the leash, allowing the dog to come within 3 meters of Nyla, then pulled back. Don't move, ma'am. Sudden movements make Thor nervous. And when Thor gets nervous, Branson left the threat hanging. Nyla's hands were shaking. She'd never been afraid of dogs before. But Thor wasn't acting like a normal dog. This was pure, targeted aggression. The German Shepherd's barks were deafening, his teeth bared, saliva dripping from his jaws as he strained against his leash. Officer Drummond, Nyla said, turning to the young police officer. Please, this isn't right. I didn't do anything wrong. There was an internal conflict on Drummond's face, but he said nothing. Years of training to obey senior officers, to never question authority, forced him to remain silent, even though his conscience clearly screamed otherwise. Final warning, ma'am, said Branson, bringing Thor closer. Show me your ID and allow the search, or I'll have to use Thor to make you comply. The dog was 15 paces away, then 10, then 5. Nyla leaned against the wire fence surrounding the path, her backpack pressed against the metal. Tears of disappointment and fear blurred her vision. Please, she whispered, please don't hurt me. I'm just trying to go home. Mrs. Patel watched the entire confrontation from her porch. The new doorbell camera, still recording on its first day installed, had captured everything. The aggressive approach, the unlawful stop, the use of the K9 to intimidate. Mrs. Patel's hands trembled as pulled out her phone and called the only person she knew who could help, Maya. It's Mrs. Patel, your sister, the police, the dog. You need to come right now. Nyla Carter was organizing supplies in the emergency room's storage room when Mrs. Patel's call came in. The panic in the old woman's voice drowned out everything else. Nyla, police, dog, road, come right now. Maya didn't ask any questions. She didn't hang up the phone properly. She started running. She still had her emergency room scrubs on, her hospital ID card dangling from her chest. But her breathing rhythm, her controlled running pace, her body moving with trained efficiency, it all came from Delta Force. 10 years of special operations training doesn't leave you. It becomes part of your DNA. The ability to assess threats, move quickly without losing control, compartmentalize fear, and focus on the mission. Right now, the mission was simple: get to Nyla. Maya's running shoes pounded the pavement, cutting through backyards. She cleared a low fence with fluid ease, and emerged onto the street running parallel to the service road. With each step, she could hear the aggressive barking growing louder. She turned the corner and scanned the scene in segments, as she had been trained to assess hostile situations. Her sister leaning against the fence, tears streaming down her face, clutching her backpack defensively. Police officers, 2 of them, one aggressive with the dog, the other uncomfortable but complicit. K9, German Shepherd, aggressive stance, trained to intimidate, not protect. Witnesses, Mrs. Patel standing on the porch with her phone, several neighbors coming out of their homes, many people filming. Setting, a clearly marked publicly accessible road with legal access. No legitimate reason to stop. Assessment, unlawful detention, threat of excessive force, racial profiling. Response, urgent intervention. Thor, stop, plots, bribe. The commands were given in German, sharply and authoritatively. Maya's voice carried the unique tone of someone who knew exactly how military working dogs were trained and how to override a trainer's authority. The effect was immediate. Thor stopped barking mid-bark, his ears flattened against his skull. The German Shepherd lay down in the classic down position, his aggressive stance gone. Because his training came before everything else, a mixed whimper escaped his throat. Military K9s were trained to respond to German commands from any trainer who knew the language. It was a security protocol. If the dog's regular trainer became incapacitated, another soldier could take control. Thor's reaction proved he was trained in military-style K9 protocols, which made his use for intimidation even more terrifying. Branson's face paled. His hand holding the leash went limp as he looked at Maya, then at the now submissive dog, then back at Maya. What's going on? Who are you? Maya stepped forward measuredly, positioning herself between Thor and Nyla. She turned to her sister. Are you hurt? Nyla shook her head without speaking, waves of relief washing over her. Maya Branson. And when she spoke, her voice carried the quiet threat of someone who had faced real combat threats and remained unfazed by a small-town power-hungry cop. I'm with Delta Force, active duty for 10 years. I've had K9 operational training. The person you harassed is my sister. Give me your badge number, now. Branson's shock gave way to defensive anger. You can't give me orders. I'm not giving you orders. I'm holding you accountable.
Maya pulled out her phone and started recording. You just illegally detained a civilian on public property. You used your K9 for intimidation and coercion. You had no reasonable cause, no legal justification, nothing. She pointed to the clearly marked sign. This is a designated public service area. My sister walks this path every day. She's a second-grade teacher with spelling tests in her backpack, and you decided to scare her with your dog." Drummond paled, clearly realizing how bad the situation had become. "Ma'am, we were responding to complaints." "What complaints?" Maya cut him off. "Who called? What specific complaint justified this stop?" "Silence. That's what I thought." Maya looked at Branson. "You targeted my sister because she's black and you thought she didn't belong on this road, and you used your dog as a weapon to scare her into submission. That's not law enforcement. This is harassment under the guise of law enforcement." Mrs. Patel called out from her porch. "Everything is recorded on the camera at the new doorbell. Every second." Branson's jaw tightened. "Listen." "No, you listen." Maya cut him off. "I worked with military K9 units in war zones. I know exactly what Thor just did and what you trained him to do. This was not a controlled search. This was an attack designed to intimidate. And to use a dog like this against an unarmed civilian in a public area, that's a human rights violation." She moved closer to Nyla and placed her body between her sister and the officers. "Give me your badge numbers, both of you, and I want your supervisor's name." Branson's hand moved toward his radio, and Maya's eyes instantly followed the movement. "Call whoever you want. I'm calling the ACLU, the FBI Civil Rights Division, and every news outlet in the state. Tomorrow, everyone will know what you did here today." Drummond fumbled for his business card and handed it over. "Officer Kyle Drummond. Our supervisor is Chief Daniel Shaw." Branson glared at his partner, but finally pulled out his own business card and threw it into Maya's hand with obvious anger. "Officer Rick Branson. K9 unit, and you're making a mistake here, ma'am." "No," Maya replied calmly. "You made the mistake. You just don't know how big it is yet." Nyla turned, her voice softening. "Come on, brother, let's go home, and we won't take the street. We'll walk on this public path like you do every day, because it's your right." Maya's hand on Nyla's shoulder, they walked past Thor, past Branson, his face burning with shame and anger, past Drummond, who couldn't meet their eyes, and walked together. Behind them, Mrs. Patel waved from her porch, the red light of her doorbell camera still steadily blinking, recording everything. As they turned the corner, Nyla finally found her voice. "Maya, I thought he was going to let that dog loose. I know, but he didn't. And now we'll make sure he never does that to anyone again." As Maya walked, she pulled out her phone and began typing a message to the civil rights lawyer she had met while doing trauma counseling in VA. Because this wasn't just about Nyla anymore. It was about everyone being terrorized in a public space by officers who thought their badges and dogs gave them the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. Officer Rick Branson had started a fight with the wrong family, and Nyla Carter was about to show exactly what happened when a Delta Force veteran's sister threatened a Delta Force veteran's sister. The video went viral within 6 hours. Mrs. Patel's doorbell camera footage was crystal clear. A teacher in a yellow dress was walking home on a clearly marked public road. 2 police officers were approaching her for no apparent reason. A massive German Shepherd was being used to intimidate an unarmed woman. And then dramatically, a woman in an emergency services uniform appeared and took control of the dog with military precision. By morning, the video had been viewed 3 million times. By midday, news cameras were parked on Glenvale Avenue.
But Nyla Carter wasn't interested in viral fame. She was interested in justice. That meant building a case so comprehensive, documented, and undeniable that no amount of effort by the police department could make it go away. "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't skip anything." Attorney Ava Brooks sat across from Maya and Nyla in the Carter family's living room, her laptop open, her notebook filled with detailed notes. 45 years old, she had built her career prosecuting civil rights violations and had a formidable reputation. When Maya called her the night before, Ava had immediately cleared her schedule. As Nyla recounted the entire incident, Maya recorded it on her phone, the standard documentation procedure Delta Force had taught her. Every detail mattered, every timestamp, every witness. "How often do you walk this path?" Ava asked. "Every weekday, for 2 years, sometimes on weekends too." Nyla pulled out her phone and showed photos she'd taken along this path over time. Birds, wildflowers, the stream, all time-stamped and geotagged. "I never had any problems until yesterday." "Good. That establishes a pattern of use." Ava took notes. "And does the sign clearly state that it's open to the public?" Maya pulled up a photo Nyla had taken months ago. "Public easement, open access. I verified it with the city planning department. The road has been public since 1987. Ava smiled bitterly. "So Officer Branson had no legal basis to stop you. No trespassing, no reasonable cause, nothing. Worse," Maya added, "he used his K9 as a deterrent weapon. Thor's behavior indicates he was trained for aggressive actions, not legitimate search procedures." "How can you be sure?" "I served 10 years in Delta Force. I worked with military K9 units in Iraq and Afghanistan. Properly trained search dogs don't behave like that. Thor was just barking and attacking. He wasn't designed to search for contraband, but to intimidate." Maya opened a video on her phone. This is how a legitimate K9 search is conducted. In the video, a calm and focused German Shepherd worked methodically with its handler, indicating specific scents without displaying aggression or exaggerated behavior. Thor's behavior was completely different, Maya continued. Branson was using him as a psychological weapon. This violates both K9 protocols and civil rights law. Ava leaned back and began to think. We'll need to prove that this behavior is a pattern in practice. A single incident could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. But if Branson has done this before, he has. The voice came from the door. Mrs. Patel was standing there, tablet in hand, looking determined. Mrs. Patel, Nyla said, jumping to her feet. Come in. Would you like some tea? No thank you, dear. I came to show you something. The elderly woman sat down in the chair, her fingers navigating the tablet with surprising ease. The camera on my doorbell has been recording for 3 weeks. My son set it up and showed me how to review the footage. She opened a video from 2 weeks before Nyla's incident. This is Officer Branson. Same road, different victim. They watched Branson stop a young Hispanic man walking down the same road. Same aggressive approach. Same intimidation using Thor. Same illegal stop on public property. There's more, Ms. Patel said quietly, opening another video. Then another, then another. Over the next 30 minutes she showed them 6 separate incidents. All within 3 weeks. All on the same public road. All targeting minorities, blacks, Hispanics, Asians. All used Thor aggressively to intimidate. All ended with the victims fleeing quickly because they were too scared or not confident enough to stand up for their rights. Until Nyla, until Maya. How many people saw these? Ava asked, her voice tinged with controlled anger. Everyone on this street sees that road. Most of us have cameras now. The neighborhood watch group was discussing it, but no one knew what to do. There was shame and determination on Mrs. Patel's face. We should have acted sooner. We should have protected those people. But we didn't know how, and they didn't come back to file a complaint. They were too scared, Maya said quietly. That's the purpose of intimidation tactics, to scare people into submission. Ava began typing rapidly on her laptop. Mrs. Patel, I need copies of all these images. I also need the contact information for everyone in the neighborhood watch group, any additional video or witness statements they might have. I'll have it all to you by this evening. After Miss Patel left, Ava looked at Maya and Nyla with a mixture of satisfaction and anger. This isn't just one incident. There's a pattern, systematic harassment, and with video evidence from multiple sources, they can't deny it. What's our next step? Maya asked. We'll file a federal civil rights complaint. But first, we'll make this public. We'll hold a community meeting. We need to expose everyone Branson has targeted. We need to form a coalition. We need to make this incident too big to ignore. The Glenvale Community Center filled up within an hour of the meeting announcement. News of the viral video had spread quickly through the neighborhood, and people came. Some angry, some scared, all wanting answers. Pastor Marcus Greer stood at the podium, his presence commanding respect. 58 years old, he had led Greater Hope Baptist Church for 20 years and had become a pillar of Glenvale's black community. We are here tonight because one of us was terrorized in a public space by officers sworn to protect her, he began, his deep voice filling the hall. But what we've learned is that this was not an isolated incident. This was systematic. Ava Brooks took the microphone, professional and precise. My name is Ava Brooks. I am a civil rights attorney. What happened to Nyla Carter violates federal law. Using a police dog to intimidate someone in a public space, without reasonable cause or legal justification, is a violation of civil rights. According to the evidence we have gathered, this incident has been repeated multiple times. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A few people shifted uncomfortably and exchanged glances. If anyone here has experienced similar treatment, Ava continued, please step forward. Your testimony matters. Your experiences matter. Together, we can build a case demanding accountability. Slowly, a hand rose from the back. A young black man in his 20s stood up, his voice trembling slightly. I'm Marcus Williams. 3 weeks ago, Officer Branson stopped me on the same road. He said I was trespassing. His dog Thor got so close I could feel its breath. I was terrified. I left and never went back. Another hand. Gabriela Sanchez. Last month, the same thing happened to me. The officer said I didn't belong there. I'm a nurse at Ben County Hospital. I was walking home from my shift. More hands, more stories. By the end of the evening, 17 people had come forward with nearly identical stories, all minorities, all stopped in a public space, all threatened with K9, all too scared to file a formal complaint at the time, until now. While Maya was at the community meeting, an unexpected event occurred at the Glenvale Police Department. Captain Lisa Chu was sitting in her office, technically in the Internal Affairs Department, but the department was so small that she handled multiple duties. 42 years old, she was one of only 3 Asian American officers in the department, and the only woman above the rank of sergeant. She had been replaying the viral video for hours, and she was reviewing her own files, complaints about Officer Branson that had mysteriously disappeared or been deemed unfounded by Chief Shaw. There was a hesitant knock at her door. Officer Kyle Drummond stood there, looking sleep-deprived. "Captain Chu, can I talk to you, off the record?" Chu studied the young officer. He was 26 years old, had been a cop for 3 years, and was clearly struggling with something. "Close the door, Drummond. Nothing is really off the record, but I'm listening." Drummond sat down heavily, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "What Branson did to that teacher yesterday, it wasn't the first time, and it wasn't the worst." "I know," Chu said quietly. "I've been documenting these kinds of complaints for 2 years, but they keep getting swept under the rug." "By Chief Shaw?" "By Chief Shaw." Drummond took a shaky breath. "Branson trained me. When I first joined the K9 unit, he taught me how to use Thor for what he called obedience. He said some people needed to be discouraged from using public spaces near industrial properties. Some people," Chu repeated, his voice flat. "Minorities." He didn't say it directly, but it was clear. Black people, Hispanics, Asians, anyone who didn't fit in the neighborhood. Drummond's voice was filled with shame, and he taught us to use Thor as a scare tactic. Make the dog aggressive, make him bark and let him attack, make people think they're going to be attacked. Most people run away. Problem solved, no paperwork. "But that's illegal," Chu said. "Harassment under the guise of the law, it's a civil rights violation." "I know that now. I knew it was wrong then. But Branson was senior, and Chief Shaw backed him every time someone complained. So I thought," his voice trailed off. "You thought that's how things worked?" "Yes." Drummond looked up into his eyes. "But yesterday, when he subdued that Delta Force veteran Thor with 3 German commands, when he looked at Branson as if he were nothing, I realized how wrong we were. I realized how wrong I was." Chu leaned forward. "Kyle, I'll be honest with you. I've been preparing a case against Branson for months. I have documentation of 17 complaints that Chief Shaw dismissed or covered up. There are training records showing Thor was certified in intimidation tactics that violate department policy. But I need testimony from someone on the inside. Someone from the K9 unit needs to explain how Branson operates. You want me to testify against him?" "I want you to tell the truth, under oath, to federal investigators." Chu pulled out a file and slid it across the desk. "Because the FBI Civil Rights Division is getting involved. And when they get involved, everyone involved will have a choice. Cooperate and maybe salvage something, or go down with Branson and Shaw." Drummond stared at the file for a long time. Then he nodded. "I'll do it. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything." The FBI field office in the regional capital received Ava Brooks's formal complaint on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Special Agent Sandra Mitchell from the Civil Rights Division had launched an investigation. On Tuesday, Agent Mitchell was in Glenvale, sitting in the community center with Maya, Nyla, Ava, and a growing coalition of victims and witnesses. "I want to clarify the subject of our investigation," Mitchell said, her voice reflecting the authority of someone who had prosecuted dozens of civil rights cases. "This isn't just a matter of a cop having a bad day. Based on the evidence you've provided, video footage, witness statements, pattern documents, we are dealing with a systematic civil rights violation under the guise of the law." He pulled up a slide showing the legal framework. Title 18, USCC, Section 242, criminalizes anyone who deliberately deprives a person of their constitutional rights under the guise of the law. This includes excessive use of force, wrongful arrests, and harassment based on race. "What about the dog?" Maya asked. "Thor was trained as a weapon. If we can prove that the K9 was intentionally trained for intimidation rather than legitimate law enforcement purposes, that would be another violation. It would show intent." Mitchell looked at Maya. "Your military K9 experience will be crucial testimony." Over the next week, the investigation rapidly expanded. FBI agents questioned everyone who had been prominent at the community meeting. They obtained all of Mrs. Patel's doorbell footage. They examined Thor's training records. They reviewed the department's K9 protocols. And they discovered something very important. 3 years earlier, Chief Shaw had quietly changed K9 training standards to emphasize aggressive behavior for compliance. The language was bureaucratic, but the intent was clear: to train the dogs to intimidate people, not to conduct proper searches. It was a policy, Agent Mitchell explained to Ava. Shaw institutionalized harassment. He created official procedures that violated civil rights laws and then ordered officers like Branson to implement them. "Can you prove Shaw knew this was illegal?" Ava asked. "We have the emails. Shaw received 17 complaints about Branson's K9 tactics over 3 years. He dismissed every single one. And in 2 cases, he specifically told Branson to continue using effective deterrent methods. This was definitive proof, not just one bad cop, but a systematic policy directed from the top." The Glenvale City Council called an emergency meeting. Ruth Hale, the black female council member who had been pushing for police reform for years, finally had the evidence she needed. We have federal inspectors documenting civil rights violations by our police department, she said from the council podium. We have 17 victims. We have video evidence. We have witnesses from within the department. And we have a chief who not only allows this but actively encourages it. She looked at the other council members. We can wait for the FBI to finish its investigation and force changes. Or we can act now. Remove Chief Shaw from duty until the investigation is complete. Make urgent reforms to K9 protocols. Establish a civilian oversight board. Show our community that we take this seriously. The debate was heated. Some council members wanted to support law enforcement and wait for the investigation. Others agreed that the evidence was too strong and that action was necessary. The vote was very close. 5-4 in favor of suspending Chief Shaw and implementing urgent reforms. It wasn't everything Ruth wanted, but it was a start. That evening, Maya sat on the porch with Nyla, watching the sunset paint Glenvale's sky in shades of orange and gold. It's really happening, Nyla said quietly. A federal investigation. The chief suspended. People coming forward. This is just the beginning, Maya replied. The hard part starts now. The trial, the testimony, ensuring the reforms are implemented. Are you scared? Maya thought. I'm not scared. I'm determined. I spent 10 years in Delta Force fighting threats overseas. Now I'm fighting a threat here, at home. The abuse of power by people who think their badges make them untouchable. She looked at her sister. What Branson did to you, what Shaw allowed, what the department turned a blind eye to, it's not just wrong. It's a crime, and we're going to prove it. Down the street, they could see the lights on at Mrs. Patel's house. The small LED on the doorbell camera was still blinking, still recording, still bearing witness. Tomorrow, the FBI would formally charge Branson and Shaw. The community coalition would continue to grow, and Nyla Carter would continue to build the case that would dismantle the system of harassment that had terrorized her community for years. Officer Rick Branson had thought he could intimidate Nyla Carter into submission. He had forgotten that some people cannot be easily intimidated, and he never imagined that among those people would be a Delta Force veteran who knew very well how to bring down corrupt systems from within. The raids took place at dawn, simultaneously at 3 different locations. Officer Rick Branson was having breakfast at his suburban home when federal agents knocked on his door. At the police headquarters, FBI agents entered Chief Daniel Shaw's office with a search warrant while he was settling into his office. At the K9 training facility, Agent Mitchell oversaw the seizure of training records, video footage, and Thor. Thor would be evaluated by independent K9 experts to determine whether he had been intentionally trained to subdue attackers. By 8 a.m. the news was everywhere. Federal agents raid Glenvale Police Department. By 9 a.m. Branson and Shaw were in federal custody, and by noon the true scale of their work had finally emerged. Maya stood in the conference room of the FBI field office, surrounded by evidence boards that grew heavier by the hour. Agent Mitchell had assembled a 6-person investigation team, and over the past week the team had prepared a case far more extensive than anyone had initially anticipated. 47 documented incidents, Mitchell said, pointing to the timeline on the wall. That's the number of incidents we've been able to prove Branson used Thor aggressively to intimidate over the last 3 years. And those are just the ones we have evidence for. The actual number is probably much higher. Ava Brooks stood next to Maya, reviewing the documents on her tablet. What's the racial breakdown? 41 of the 47 victims were minorities: Black, Hispanic, Asian, Middle Eastern. Mitchell pulled up a table. 6 were white, but 6 were also in interracial relationships, or had been seen with minority friends. The pattern is undeniable. And did Chief Shaw know this? Councilwoman Ruth Hale asked from across the room. He didn't just know. He directed it. Mitchell opened an email from 18 months ago. This was sent from Shaw to Branson, quote, maintain aggressive K9 protocols for public services. Property owners appreciate our efforts to preserve the character of the neighborhood. That's code for keep minorities out of the area. Maya felt a cold anger in her chest. This wasn't just a bad cop. This was systematic, deliberate, organized racism hiding behind official policy. We also found financial connections, Agent Mitchell continued. Chief Shaw was receiving a $5,000 payment every 3 months from the Glenvale Industrial Property Owners Association. The payments began 3 months before Branson's aggressive K9 tactics started. They were paying him to harass people, Nyla said quietly. Despite Maya's concerns, she insisted on being there and sat in the corner. They were paying the police chief to keep certain people away. This is corruption, said Ava. We can add bribery and conspiracy charges. Pastor Greer, who had been silent until now, spoke up. How many people did they terrorize until someone finally found the strength to resist? How many families were too scared, too poor, and too unsure of their rights to do what you did? The question hung in the air, heavy and painful. That's why we're here, Maya replied. To speak for people who can't speak for themselves. To make sure this never happens again. The community organizing efforts had gone beyond what Maya had initially imagined. What began as a small meeting at the community center had turned into a full-scale civil rights movement. Pastor Greer's church became the center. Every evening, people gathered to share their stories, coordinate their testimonies, and plan the next steps. Volunteers set up a hotline to report similar experiences. Local journalists began investigating other officers who might have used similar tactics, and the stories kept coming. "Officer Branson stopped me 6 months ago," said James Chen, a 40-year-old software engineer. "I was jogging on a public road. He said I was trespassing. His dog Thor barked so aggressively that I thought I was going to be attacked. I stopped using that road and started driving to the gym. I didn't file a complaint because I didn't think anyone would believe me. He stopped my wife and me during our anniversary walk," added Thomas and Carol Martinez. "He said we didn't belong in this neighborhood. He used his dog to chase us away. 2 months later, we moved out of Glenvale. We no longer felt safe here." Each story added a new dimension to this pattern. Every victim who came forward strengthened the case. Ava Brooks coordinated everything with the sensitivity of someone who had fought these battles before. "We're preparing a class-action civil rights lawsuit," she explained at one of the evening meetings. "Not just against Branson and Shaw, but against the entire Glenvale Police Department for creating and maintaining policies that violate constitutional rights." "What about Thor?" someone in the crowd asked. "Thor is being evaluated by military K9 experts," Maya replied. "If they determine he was trained for intentional aggressive suppression rather than legitimate law enforcement purposes, that proves intent. But Thor himself isn't the bad guy here. He was trained to behave this way by trainers who abused their authority." "What will happen to him?" asked Mrs. Patel, her voice tinged with concern. "If the experts decide he can be retrained, he'll be sent to a K9 shelter and rehabilitation program. Otherwise, he'll retire to a shelter where he can live peacefully without being used as a weapon." Maya's expression softened. "Thor deserves better than what Branson turned him into." Officer Kyle Drummond sat in an interrogation room facing FBI agents. His police career was effectively over, but his conscience was finally clear. "Branson called it the demoralize and disperse protocol," Drummond explained. His voice steady despite the gravity of the information he was revealing. "When we saw minorities, especially industrial workers, leaving their jobs in the evening, using the service road, we would make contact. We would claim they were trespassing. We would use Thor to harass them, get them to leave, and ensure they never came back." "And Chief Shaw approved this?" Agent Mitchell asked. "He created it. Branson just implemented it." Drummond pulled out a copy of the internal K9 protocols Shaw had changed 3 years ago. "See the section on aggressive behavior to enforce compliance. That's Shaw's wording. The previous chief used different protocols. K9s were supposed to be calm and controlled. Shaw changed this to emphasize intimidation. Why? Because industrial property owners were complaining about demographic changes in the neighborhood. More minorities were moving in, using public spaces, passing through areas that used to be almost entirely white. Property owners didn't like this, so they paid Shaw to do something about it." Agent Mitchell took notes. "Are you saying this was financially motivated? Follow the money. Shaw's salary is $98,000 a year, but he drives a $75,000 pickup truck, belongs to a country club with a $20,000 annual membership, and bought a vacation. Where is this money coming from?" The agents looked at each other. Financial crimes added another dimension to the investigation. "Kyle," Agent Mitchell said, deliberately using his first name, "do you understand that your statement will end your career in law enforcement? I know, but I can't keep pretending I don't know what's going on. I was part of this too. I used Thor just to scare people trying to go home. I became the kind of cop I swore I'd never be." Drummond's voice trembled slightly. "Maybe I can't undo what I've done, but I can make it stop." Captain Lisa Chu's role had transformed from internal investigator to key federal witness. For 2 years, she had secretly documented complaints that Chief Shaw had covered up. Now those documents had become crucial evidence. "When I noticed a pattern, I started saving copies," Chu explained to the FBI team. "Complaints would come in about Branson's K9 tactics. I would investigate, find them valid, and recommend disciplinary action. Then Shaw would override me, claim the complaints were unfounded, and the files would disappear from the system. But you saved copies. Every single one. 17 official complaints over 3 years, all dismissed by Shaw, all involving minorities, all describing the same behavior, aggressive K9 intimidation on public property." Agent Mitchell examined the documents with growing satisfaction. "This proves a systematic pattern. And it proves Shaw knew about it and actively covered it up." "There's more," Chu continued. "I found correspondence between Shaw and the Glenvale Industrial Property Owners Association. The association specifically asked Shaw to address the demographic issue near their properties. Shaw had responded that he would increase K9 patrols to maintain neighborhood standards. They weren't even trying to hide the racism, Ava observed. They didn't think they needed to. They controlled the local government, the police force, the narrative. Chu's tone hardened, until Nyla Carter took Thor down with 3 German commands and proved he wasn't as powerful as Branson thought. The independent K9 evaluation report arrived 2 weeks after Thor's capture. Maya attended the briefing. Her military K9 experience gave her a unique ability to understand the technical details. Thor exhibits the classic signs of intentional aggression training, explained the lead evaluator. A retired Marine Corps K9 trainer. Military and police K9s are trained to be calm and focused. They detect scents, indicate targets, and only act on specific commands. Thor's behavior pattern is entirely different. During the evaluation, he showed a video of Thor. When encountering a stationary person, Thor immediately adopts an aggressive stance. He barks, lunges, and bares his teeth. This isn't search behavior. It's intimidation behavior. Can he be retrained? Maya asked. Probably. It would take months, maybe years. But Thor is young enough, only 4 years old. He could recover with proper rehabilitation. The evaluator's expression softened. Dogs are not born aggressive. They are taught to be aggressive. Thor was turned into a weapon by trainers who abused their authority. With proper care, he can learn to be just a dog again. Where will he go during rehabilitation? Blue Ridge K9 Sanctuary in North Carolina. They specialize in retired and abused working dogs. Thor will have wide-open spaces to run, other dogs to socialize with, and trainers to help him forget the aggression that was forced upon him. Maya felt her burden lighten a little. Thor was not the enemy. He was another victim of Branson and Shaw's corruption. The federal grand jury convened 3 weeks after the first raids. Prosecutors presented evidence over 4 days, video footage from Ms. Patel and other neighbors, victim statements, inside information from Drummond, Chu's documents, financial records showing Shaw's bribes, and a K9 evaluation proving intentional aggression training. On the 5th day, the grand jury announced the indictments. Officer Rick Branson, abuse of authority, 18 counts, conspiracy to violate civil rights, assault with a dangerous weapon using K9 as a weapon, unlawful arrest, 47 counts. Chief Daniel Shaw, conspiracy to violate civil rights, bribery, obstruction of justice, abuse of authority, corporate policy, racketeering. Glenvale Industrial Property Owners Association, 5 board members, conspiracy to violate civil rights, bribery of public officials. The charges were extensive, and the potential penalties were severe. Branson faced up to 20 years in prison. The property owners each faced up to 15 years in prison. That evening, the community gathered at Greater Hope Baptist Church for what Pastor Greer called a moment of recognition and reflection. The church was packed. Maya sat with Nyla, Mrs. Patel, Ava, Ruth Hale, and dozens of others who had fought for this moment. Federal indictments were issued today, Pastor Greer announced from the pulpit. But we are not gathered here for revenge. We are here to acknowledge that justice, true justice, requires constant vigilance and collective action. He gestured to the assembled crowd. A month ago, a second-grade teacher was terrorized on a public road. Today, federal prosecutors are holding those responsible to account. This change did not happen by itself. It happened because people chose to take action. Ms. Patel chose to set up a camera and preserve the evidence. Nyla Carter chose to intervene and protect her sister. Officer Drummond chose his conscience over complicity. Captain Chu chose to document the truth. Assemblymember Hale chose to demand reform. Ava Brooks chose to fight for justice. And everyone in this room chose to tell their stories. The shelter was quiet except for the occasional whispered "Amen." Tomorrow, the legal battle will continue, Pastor Greer concluded, but tonight we understand that change is possible. One person's courage can inspire many. A community united in the pursuit of justice can overcome systems designed to oppress. After the service, Maya stood outside with Nyla, watching the sun set over Glenvale. Do you think it's really over? Nyla asked quietly. The arrests are just the beginning, Maya replied. Now there's the trial, testimony, ensuring the reforms are permanent. To make sure this never happens again. I'm scared to testify. Maya put her arm around her sister's shoulders. I'll be there with you, and you won't be alone. 47 others will testify. Drummond will testify. Chu will testify. Mrs. Patel will testify. We will all tell the truth together. Down the street, they could see the light from Mrs. Patel's doorbell camera flashing on and off. She was still recording. She was still bearing witness. The fight for justice was not over, but for the first time in years, the minority residents of Glenvale could walk the public streets without fear, and Officer Rick Branson, who had used his badge and his dog to intimidate innocent people, was finally facing consequences he couldn't escape. The Richard B. Russell Federal Building stood majestically against the autumn sky. Its modern glass and steel architecture was designed to reflect both authority and justice. 5 months after Nyla Carter confronted Officer Branson, the case that had captivated the region finally began. The courtroom was packed. Maya sat behind the prosecution table, flanked by 47 victims who had come to testify. Behind them, the media filled every available seat, cameras ready to record what federal prosecutors called one of the most important civil rights cases in the state's recent history. At the defense table, Branson and Shaw sat with their expensive lawyers. Both were dressed in suits rather than uniforms. And if you didn't know they were on trial for systematically terrorizing minorities for 3 years, they almost looked respectable. Judge Patricia Morrison presided over the case. In her early 60s, she was a black woman who had been a federal judge for 15 years. During pretrial motions, she had made it clear that this case would be conducted in strict accordance with the law and that no sympathy from law enforcement could excuse constitutional violations. The lead prosecutor was 48-year-old Korean-American James Chen. Chen had built his career prosecuting civil rights violations and police misconduct. He stood up with quiet intensity to deliver his opening statement. "Members of the jury," Chen began, "this case concerns law enforcement officers who broke their oaths, used their authority as a weapon, and systematically terrorized minorities by misusing public property." He brought up the first image on the courtroom monitors, Mrs. Patel's doorbell camera footage, showing Branson attempting to intimidate Nyla using Thor. This is Nyla Carter, a second-grade teacher walking home on a public road she has used for 2 years. And this is Officer Rick Branson, attempting to intimidate and scare her away by using his police dog as a weapon. The video played without sound, but the images were heavy. Thor's aggressive stance, Branson's deliberate positioning, Nyla's obvious fear. But Nyla Carter wasn't Officer Branson's first victim. She wasn't even his 10th. Over 3 years, we will prove that Branson carried out 47 similar stops, all on public property, all targeting minorities, all using his K9 for aggressive intimidation rather than legitimate law enforcement. Chen clicked on the financial records. And we will prove that Chief Daniel Shaw not only knew about these violations but actively encouraged them, because the Glenvale Industrial Property Owners Association paid him $5,000 every 3 months to preserve the character of the neighborhood, which meant keeping minorities away from public spaces near their properties. He walked toward the jury. You will hear testimony from victims terrorized on public streets. You will see video evidence from multiple cameras. You will hear from Officer Kyle Drummond, who participated in these stops, and will explain how Branson trained officers to use intimidation tactics. You will hear the testimony of Captain Lisa Chu documenting the 17 official complaints Chief Shaw covered up, and you will hear the testimony of K9 experts who evaluated Thor and determined he was trained for intentional aggression instead of legitimate police work. Chen returned to the prosecutor's desk. The evidence will prove conspiracy, systematic civil rights violations, bribery, and obstruction of justice. And after hearing all of this, I will ask you to hold these defendants accountable for violating the public's trust in the most fundamental way. The defense attorneys tried to argue that Branson was only doing difficult police work and made decisions in difficult situations. However, before any evidence was presented, their arguments fell flat. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. First witness, Nyla Carter. Dressed professionally, her natural hair simply combed, Maya her hands clasped calmly despite the anxiety she knew Maya was feeling. She looked Branson in the eye as she took the oath. Branson looked away. "Ms. Carter," Prosecutor Chen began, "describe to the jury your routine walk home on June 15th. Nyla described her daily route, the public right-of-way sign, and how she had walked this path without incident for 2 years. Her voice was steady and clear, the same tone she used when teaching second graders. What happened when Officer Branson approached? He claimed I was trespassing on private property. I showed him on my phone that the path was public land. There was even a city planning document confirming it. But he refused to accept it. Then he brought his dog. Describe the dog's behavior. Thor was aggressive. He was barking loudly, lunging at me with his leash. His teeth were showing. I was very scared. Nyla's voice remained controlled. Officer Branson kept extending the leash, bringing Thor closer and closer to me. He said that if I didn't give him permission to search, he would have to use Thor to ensure compliance. Did you feel threatened? Absolutely. I'm a teacher. I work with children. I had never had any interaction with police dogs before. Thor looked like he was about to attack me. Chen showed footage from Miss Patel's doorbell camera. Is this what happened? The jury watched the video in silence. Several jurors appeared disturbed by Thor's aggressive behavior. What happened next? My sister Maya arrived. She's a Delta Force veteran who's trained in K9. She gave commands in German, and Thor immediately obeyed her instead of Officer Branson. The dog stopped. He lay down. He calmed down. What does that tell you? That Thor knows the right commands. He's trained to obey authority, but Officer Branson wasn't using those commands. He was using Thor to intimidate me, not to conduct a legitimate search. The defense tried to undermine her testimony in cross-examination, suggesting she was argumentative, misunderstood Branson's intent, and was overly fearful. Nyla remained calm. I was a teacher walking home in a public area. Officer Branson had no legal reason to stop me. He used his dog to intimidate me. The video shows exactly what happened. Second witness, Nyla Carter. She took the stand in professional attire, her posture clearly military. When asked about her background, she detailed her service in Delta Force with quiet authority. Captain Carter, Chen said. Did you receive K9 operations training? Yes. I worked with military K9 units during my tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. I received advanced trainer training for combat operations and threat detection. Based on that training, what did you observe when you arrived at the scene? Maya's voice was firm and professional. I observed the German Shepherd displaying an aggressive posture, barking, lunging, baring its teeth. The trainer, Officer Branson, was positioning the dog to maximize the scare effect. This is not proper K9 search protocol. How do you know that? Properly trained search dogs are calm and focused. They indicate sense without showing aggression. Thor's behavior indicated he was specifically trained to intimidate, to scare people, not to conduct legitimate searches. Chen played a comparison video, the calm work of properly trained K9s versus Thor's aggressive behavior. What did you do when you got there? I gave 3 commands in German. Halt, Platz, bleib, stop, lie down, stay. Thor responded immediately, lay down, and displayed an obedient attitude. This proved he knew the correct commands, but Officer Branson wasn't using them. Why didn't Branson use the correct commands? Because he wasn't trying to search for contraband. He was trying to scare my sister and drive her away from public property. Thor was a psychological intimidation weapon, not a legitimate law enforcement tool. Defense attorneys tried to argue that Maya was biased, that her military training couldn't be applied to civilian policing, that she obstructed a lawful stop. Maya's response was devastating. I worked in real war zones with real threats. What Officer Branson did to my sister, intimidating an unarmed teacher on public property, was not law enforcement. It was an abuse of authority, and I have the training to recognize that difference. Third witness, Ms. Divya Patel. The elderly woman stepped to the witness stand with dignity, carrying a tablet containing footage from the doorbell camera. Ms. Patel, Chen said gently, how long have you lived on Glenvale Avenue? 42 years. I moved there when my husband got a job at the university. I raised my children there. I taught elementary school for 30 years before retiring. And you recently installed a doorbell camera, 3 weeks before Mrs. Carter's incident. My son insisted on it for security. He showed me how to review the footage. What did you discover when you reviewed the footage? Mrs. Patel's voice was calm but had an emotional undertone. I discovered that Officer Branson repeatedly stopped people on that public road, always minorities, always with his dog, always aggressive. I counted 12 incidents in 3 weeks. Chen showed the footage clip by clip. Different victims, same pattern. Thor barking aggressively, Branson intimidating, people fleeing. Why didn't anyone report this before? Because they were afraid. Because they thought no one would believe them. Because if you're a minority, standing up to the police feels dangerous. Ms. Patel looked directly at the jury. That's why I'm here, to testify, to say that what I saw was wrong and that I should have acted sooner. Fourth witness, Officer Kyle Drummond. The young officer took the stand in civilian clothes, his police career over, but his conscience clear. He had been granted immunity in exchange for truthful testimony. Officer Drummond, said Chen, describe the training you received with Officer Branson. Drummond took a breath. Branson taught me what he called aggressive compliance protocols. He said certain people needed to be deterred from using public spaces near industrial properties. He meant minorities. How were you supposed to deter them? Use Thor. Stop them for minor or fabricated violations, not using the crosswalk, trespassing on public land, suspicious behavior. Then bring out the dog. Let Thor bark aggressively. Jump, approaching them close enough to scare them. Most people leave and never come back. Did Chief Shaw know about this? He created this policy. Branson just implemented it. Shaw specifically told us to maintain neighborhood standards through enhanced K9 patrols. We all knew what that meant. The defense attempted to portray Drummond as a disgruntled officer seeking vindication, but his testimony was corroborated by video evidence and internal documents. Fifth witness, Captain Lisa Chu. She presented 17 official complaints that Chief Shaw had denied or covered up, all detailing how K9 was intimidating minorities in the same manner. I recommended disciplinary action in every case, Chu testified. In each one, Chief Shaw rejected me every time. He claimed the complaints were baseless, that the officers followed proper procedures, but this pattern was undeniable. He presented emails between Shaw and the Industrial Property Owners Association, revealing financial ties and an explicit request to address demographic concerns. Witnesses 6 through 25, the victims, the people Branson terrorized, took the stand one by one. Each recounted a different version of the same story. Stopped in a public place for no legitimate reason, threatened with Thor, too afraid to resist or complain. Marcus Williams, I'm a software engineer. I was jogging. Thor got so close I could feel his breath. I was terrified. Gabriela Sanchez, I'm a nurse. I was walking home from the night shift. Officer Branson told me I didn't belong in that neighborhood. James Chen, I've lived in Glenvale for 15 years. After Branson stopped me with his dog, I didn't feel safe in my own neighborhood. 26th witness, Dr. Sarah Brennan, K9 behavior expert. She had evaluated Thor and reviewed his training records. Her testimony was technical but heavy. Thor shows clear signs of being deliberately conditioned to exhibit aggressive behavior. Military and civilian police dogs are trained to be calm and focused. Thor, however, was trained to be aggressive and intimidating. This is not an accident. It is deliberate programming. Can you prove that? The training records show aggressive behavior drills that violate standard K9 protocols. Thor was rewarded for behaviors like barking and attacking, which police dogs are trained to suppress. This created a dog that looked dangerous but was actually ineffective for legitimate search work. What does that tell you about how he was intended to be used? He was trained not as a law enforcement tool, but as a psychological weapon. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos from multiple sources, testimonies from insiders and experts, financial records proving bribery, internal documents revealing systematic policy. The defense tried to portray Branson and Shaw as dedicated public servants by calling character witnesses. But when confronted with video evidence and model documents, these witnesses crumbled under cross-examination. Closing arguments were made on Friday afternoon. Prosecutor Chen stood before the jury one last time. You've seen the evidence. You've heard the testimony. 47 victims, 3 years of systematic abuse. Video evidence. Testimony from insiders, financial documents proving bribery, expert analysis proving K9 was trained as a weapon. He gestured toward the defense table. These defendants did not merely violate policy, they violated constitutional rights. They used their badges and their dogs to terrorize minorities simply for being in public spaces. They took money to do it. They covered it up when people complained, and they thought they would never have to face the consequences. Chen walked toward the witness stand. Officer Branson terrorized people with his dog. Chief Shaw took bribes to create the policy that made this possible, and both believed their badges and authority placed them above the law. He returned to his seat. Hold them accountable. All charges, all crimes, show that these are the consequences of civil rights violations. The jury deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days. When they returned, the jury forewoman, a middle-aged Asian American woman who had been a teacher for 20 years, stood and read the verdict. In the case of the United States of America versus Rick Branson, charged with violating rights under the guise of law, guilty. She read all the charges. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Every count, every charge. In the case of the United States of America versus Daniel Shaw, guilty, 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 guilty. The courtroom erupted in measured celebration. Nyla clasped Maya's hand tightly. Mrs. Patel wiped away her tears. The victims embraced each other, a sense of relief and vindication washing over them. Judge Morrison banged his gavel to restore order. Sentencing will take place 6 weeks from today. The defendants will remain in federal custody until sentencing. As the marshals led Branson and Shaw away in handcuffs, shock and anger were etched on Branson's face. He had truly believed his badge would protect him. He was wrong. He was wrong. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun felt hotter. Maya, along with Nyla, was surrounded by the community that had fought for this moment. "How do you feel?" asked a reporter. Maya thought carefully. "We were proven right. We're tired, we're grateful. But this isn't the end. It's the beginning of ensuring that reforms are permanent and that this never happens again." Another reporter. "What do you want people to know?" "That accountability is possible. That one person's courage can inspire many. That communities united in the pursuit of justice can overcome systems designed to oppress." Maya looked into the cameras. "My sister was terrorized while walking home in a public space. Today those responsible face the consequences. Tomorrow we will ensure this never happens to anyone again." Reverend Greer stepped forward. "This victory belongs to everyone who refused to remain silent. To Ms. Patel, who documented the truth. To Officer Drummond, who chose his conscience. To Captain Chu, who preserved the evidence. To every victim who testified. Justice demanded all of us." When the press conference ended, Maya saw Drummond standing apart from the crowd. You did the right thing, she told him. It doesn't feel right. It feels too little, too late. You can't change the past, but your testimony helped secure a better future. That counts for something. Sentences were handed down. Sentences would be announced, and Glenvale would begin a long process of healing and reform. Officer Rick Branson and Chief Daniel Shaw had finally faced the responsibility they had avoided for years, and Nyla Carter had proven that some struggles, the struggles for justice and dignity, are always worth fighting. 6 weeks after the guilty verdicts, the same federal courtroom filled again for sentencing. But the atmosphere was different, not tense with uncertainty, but heavy with the expectation that justice would finally be measured in years of prison time. Maya sat in the front row next to Nyla, surrounded by 47 victims who had traveled to see the outcome of the long struggle for accountability. Behind them, community members, including Mrs. Patel, Reverend Greer, Assemblywoman Ruth Hale, and Captain Chu, who had been promoted to acting chief while the department underwent federal oversight and reform, filled all the empty seats. Branson and Shaw were brought in wearing orange prison jumpsuits, a stark contrast to their expensive suits, reflecting their federal custody status. Branson's cocky demeanor was completely gone, replaced by a vacant-eyed resignation. Shaw looked older and frailer, the weight of his crimes finally evident on his face. Judge Patricia Morrison entered the courtroom with a serious expression. She had spent the last few weeks reviewing pre-sentence reports, victim impact statements, and extensive documentation of the damage caused by the defendants. This court has presided over many cases involving abuse of authority, Judge Morrison began. But very few have exhibited such systematic, deliberate, and persistent civil rights violations as in this case. She projected statistics onto the monitors in the courtroom. Over 3 years, you defendants carried out 47 documented unlawful stops targeting minorities on public property. You used police dogs as weapons of psychological terror. You accepted bribes to enforce racist policies. You covered up complaints and obstructed justice. And you did all of this while hiding behind badges that are supposed to represent protection and service. Judge Morrison looked at each defendant in turn. Your actions did more than harm individuals. You damaged the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve. You created fear where there should be trust. You proved that some people's worst suspicions about corrupt police were absolutely justified. He started with Branson. Officer Rick Branson, you were the architect and chief implementer of this intimidation campaign. For 3 years you used your badge and your dog to terrorize innocent people. You taught your methods to other officers. Throughout this trial, you have shown no remorse. Branson stood with his hands cuffed, showing no emotion on his face. For 47 counts of deprivation of rights under the law, I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison. For the conspiracy charges, 3 years consecutively. For the charges of using K9 as a weapon, 2 years consecutively. For the wrongful arrest charges, 1 year consecutively. 1 year consecutively. Total sentence, 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. The figure was a heavy blow. At 43, Branson would be 61 when released, his career ruined, his most productive years behind him. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, you will forfeit all your retirement benefits, all assets acquired during your criminal activities, and you will be permanently barred from any law enforcement or security position. Your K9 trainer certification is permanently revoked. He turned to Shaw. Chief Daniel Shaw, you were more than a participant. You were the enabler. You created the policies that allowed these violations. You accepted bribes to implement them. You covered up complaints and obstructed justice. You violated the public's trust in the most fundamental way. Shaw clenched his jaw but said nothing. For the crime of violating civil rights, I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison. For bribery, 5 consecutive years. For obstruction of justice, 3 consecutive years. For extortion, 2 consecutive years. Total sentence, 20 years in federal prison. 62-year-old Shaw will be 82 by the time he is released if he lives that long. You will forfeit all your retirement benefits, all your assets, including the vacation home you purchased with bribe money, and you will be permanently barred from public office. The Glenvale Police Department will be subject to a federal consent decree for at least 5 years to ensure that systematic reforms are implemented and maintained. Judge Morrison addressed the courtroom. To the victims, these sentences cannot compensate for the harm you have suffered. They cannot restore the sense of security that was violated. But I hope they provide some closure and send a clear message that such abuses will not be tolerated. He looked at Maya. Special Agent Carter's sister was terrorized while walking home in a public area. The courage to resist and the community's determination to seek justice are the direct result of these convictions and will prevent countless violations in the future. As the marshals led the defendants away for the last time, Branson turned and looked at Maya. There was hatred on his face, but there was something else too, the pain of having to admit that he had defeated her every time. Maya met his gaze with determination until Branson looked away. She was the winner. She had won not only the case, but the greater battle for honor and justice. 2 weeks later, a victim compensation fund was established using the seized assets of Branson, Shaw, and the Convicted Property Owners Association board members. The total exceeded $800,000. Shaw's vacation home, Branson's truck and boat, the association's fines. Maya attended the first compensation hearing and watched as people terrorized years ago were finally recognized and compensated. Marcus Williams, whose running routine was disrupted due to Branson's threats, received $15,000 in compensation for emotional distress and for purchasing a running club membership to avoid using public roads. Nurse Gabriela Sanchez, who was stopped while walking home from her hospital shift, received $20,000 in compensation, including moving expenses, because she felt it was unsafe to continue living in Glenvale. The Martinez family, who left Glenvale entirely after being harassed during the anniversary walk, received $35,000, enough to cover moving expenses and start a new life elsewhere or return if they wished. The victims came forward one by one. Some cried, some were stoic. All were grateful that someone had finally listened to them, believed them, and righted the situation. "This doesn't erase what happened," said Marcus Williams as he accepted his check. "But it proves we weren't lying. It proves we weren't guilty. It proves we matter." Nyla's compensation, $50,000 as the victim who brought this case to light, was used directly to establish the Glenvale Civil Rights Education Fund. She insisted. "I'm a teacher," she explained. "I want this money to be used to teach future generations about civil rights, standing up against injustice, and how one person's courage can change everything." Thor's journey to the Blue Ridge K9 shelter took place on a cool autumn morning. Maya insisted on being there. The 50-acre property where the shelter was located sat in the mountains of North Carolina and was home to retired military and police dogs in need of rehabilitation or simply wanting to live out their days in a peaceful place. Maya went there herself to see where Thor would spend his retirement. Shelter director Maria Rodriguez, a former Marine dog trainer, greeted her at the door. "You must be Captain Carter. We've been expecting you." They walked through the facility. Spacious dog kennels, open play areas, wooded paths where dogs could run freely. Maya counted about 15 dogs in sight, all of them former working dogs now living in peace. "Thor arrived last week," Maria explained. "We're evaluating him. Started basic rehabilitation. Would you like to see him?" Thor lay in a large outdoor pen, in the shade of an oak tree. When he saw Maya, his ears perked up, but he didn't move. He was waiting for permission, showing traces of his military training, tainted by Branson's corruption. "Come," Maya said softly in German. "Come." Thor stood up and walked slowly, no aggression in his posture. Maya knelt and let Thor sniff her hand, then gently scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," she murmured. "You're safe now. You're not a weapon anymore. Just a dog." Thor wagged his tail hesitantly, as if unsure whether this kindness was real. "How's the rehabilitation going?" Maya asked Maria. "Better than we expected." Thor was trained for aggression, but it wasn't in his nature. It had been forced upon him. With the right trainers and positive reinforcement, he's already showing improvement. In 6 months, maybe a year, he'll be a completely different dog. And then he'll live here. He'll play with other dogs. He'll go for walks. He'll get his belly rubbed. He'll just live in peace. No commands, no duties, no being used. Maria smiled. Every dog deserves that, especially those forced to do terrible things. Maya spent an hour there, watching Thor interact with the trainers. She saw glimpses of the gentle dog he could have been if Branson hadn't corrupted him. Before leaving, she knelt down once more. "You're not a weapon anymore," she whispered to Thor. "You're just Thor. And that's enough." The German Shepherd licked her hand, a simple gesture of trust that felt like forgiveness. The Glenvale Police Department's reforms were comprehensive and mandated by the federal government. Now officially Chief Chu, Captain Lisa Chu, implemented these reforms with determination. "We are rebuilding from scratch," she announced at the first Community Oversight Board meeting. Every policy, every training protocol, every procedure that allowed Branson and Shaw's corruption to flourish. The reforms included mandatory body cameras for all officers, with footage uploaded to independent servers that the police department cannot access or delete. A complete overhaul of K9 training protocols, requiring independent certification and annual behavior evaluations. The Civilian Oversight Board will be equipped with the authority to independently investigate complaints and subpoena witnesses. Bias training for all officers, conducted by external civil rights organizations. Prohibition of quotas or incentives for stops, searches, or arrests that could encourage targeting specific demographic groups. Community policing initiatives requiring officers to attend neighborhood meetings and build relationships. Zero-tolerance policy for civil rights violations, with mandatory reporting and investigation. These reforms are not suggestions, Chief Chu emphasized. They are federal requirements mandated by the settlement agreement, and they are the right thing to do. We lost the public's trust. This is how we will regain it. The first test came 2 months after implementation began. An officer stopped a young black man riding a bicycle on suspicion. Within hours, the Civilian Oversight Board reviewed body camera footage, interviewed witnesses, and determined the stop. The officer received a written reprimand and mandatory retraining. The youth received a formal apology. The incident was publicly documented. This is how accountability works, said Council Member Ruth Hale at the next City Council meeting. Swift, transparent, with consequences for violations and compensation for victims. The road's opening ceremony took place on a Saturday morning 6 months after the convictions. The weather was perfect. A clear blue sky, a light breeze, the morning sun gilding everything. The road set aside for public service had been completely transformed. What used to be a narrow dirt road now featured a smooth walking path with solar-powered lights on both sides, emergency phone booths every 100 meters, and newly planted trees forming a green canopy. Most importantly, there was a large sign at the entrance, Nyla's Path, open to the public, open to everyone. Below it was a smaller plaque, dedicated to everyone who fought for the right to walk freely and safely on public land. Hundreds of people attended the ceremony, families with children, elderly couples, runners, dog walkers, a true cross-section of Glenvale's increasingly diverse community. Reverend Greer opened the ceremony with a prayer. We are gathered today not just to open a path but to celebrate a journey. The ground beneath our feet has always been public land, but it took courage, determination, and collective action to make that fact visible and protect it. Ruth Hale spoke next. 6 months ago, a teacher was terrorized on this path while walking home because she was black. Today, federal reforms guarantee this will never happen again. This path represents the transformation from a place of fear to a space of freedom. Ava Brooks presented the legal framework. Thanks to the settlement agreement and city ordinances, this path is permanently protected. Any officer attempting to unlawfully stop someone here will be subject to immediate investigation and federal prosecution. The law now explicitly protects your right to use this space. Maya and Nyla were invited to cut the ribbon. The red ribbon was stretched across the path's entrance and painted with handprints from elementary school students, including Nyla's second-grade class. Would you like to say something? Asked Reverend Greer. Nyla stepped forward, her voice carrying over the crowd. I am a teacher. I teach second graders about courage, justice, and standing up for what is right. 6 months ago, I learned these lessons the hard way myself. She pointed to the road. Officer Branson tried to make me afraid to walk here, but my sister taught me not to let fear win. This community taught me that one person's courage can inspire many. And everyone here today proves that change is possible when we refuse to accept injustice as normal. Maya quietly added, my sister now walks this path every day. So do dozens of others. This path belongs to everyone, and we fought to make sure everyone knew that. Together, they cut the ribbon. Cheers, cheers, and a few happy tears erupted. Children ran ahead, exploring the new path with its smooth surface and artistic fence panels designed by local students. Parents moved more slowly, admiring the benches and the signs at every intersection reading public property, no permission needed, open to all. Mrs. Patel walked with Ava, both women happily watching the celebration. The camera at my doorbell recorded the beginning of this story, Mrs. Patel said. I'm glad to see the end. This isn't the end, Ava gently corrected. It's a beginning. These reforms, this path, this community consciousness, these are the foundations of lasting change. That evening, Maya and Nyla walked this path together as the sun set, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. As dusk approached, solar-powered lights flickered on and off, creating a pleasant glow. Others were walking too, families, couples, solo walkers. A young black man jogged by with headphones, completely at ease. A Hispanic couple walked hand in hand, pushing a stroller. An elderly Asian woman walked her small dog, stopping to chat with neighbors. They were all fearlessly using the public space, without harassment, without having to justify their presence. How do you feel? Maya asked her sister. Nyla thought, different, good, but different. I still get nervous when I see police cars. I still carry my phone ready to record, but at the same time, I feel empowered. Like I proved that standing up matters. It matters. You mattered. Your courage inspired 47 more people to come forward. Your case dismantled a corrupt system and created reforms that will protect thousands of people who will never know your name. They arrived at the spot where Branson had stopped Nyla. The place was now marked by an artistic fence panel, with hands of different colors reaching toward the bright sun. Do you ever think about Branson or Shaw? Nyla asked. Sometimes. Mostly I think about Thor. Maya smiled slightly. I got an email from the shelter yesterday. Thor befriended a retired Marine Corps K9. They play together every day. He's just learning to be a dog. That's the best ending for him. It is. They continued walking. The road ahead well lit and safe. Behind them, Mrs. Patel's house was visible. The light from the doorbell camera steadily blinking, still recording, still bearing witness, but now documenting joy instead of injustice. At the end of the road they found a small gathering, some of the victims of the trial, meeting informally. Marcus Williams ran over to them when he saw them. "Captain Carter, Mrs. Carter, I've started using this road again for my runs. It's the first time in 6 months I've felt safe." "That's exactly what we fought for," Maya replied. Reverend Greer appeared with a basket of his wife's homemade cookies. "We have a community picnic next Saturday. You should both come. We're celebrating not just the path but everyone who made it possible." As evening fell, more people appeared. Young people on bicycles, families out for an evening stroll, a musician playing guitar next to a bench, and people gathered to listen. What had once been a public service road marked by fear and harassment had become a place where the community gathered, a symbol of resistance and transformation, a symbol reminding everyone that public property truly belongs to everyone. A year after Nyla confronted Branson, Maya received an invitation to speak at the FBI Academy about civil rights advocacy and community organizing. She stood in a room filled with new agents, many of them minorities, who, like Branson, wanted to be better than the officers. "I spent 10 years in Delta Force," she told them. "I fought overseas, but the hardest fight I ever faced was here in my own country, when my sister was terrorized on public property by an officer who thought his badge made him untouchable." He showed photos from the road opening, the trial, and community organizing efforts. "You are joining law enforcement at a critical time. Officers like Branson and Shaw have undermined public trust. You have a choice. Will you be part of the problem or part of the solution? Will you protect the vulnerable or exploit them? Will you use your authority to serve or to oppress?" He looked at the young faces watching him. "My sister teaches second graders. She tells them that courage is doing the right thing even when it's hard. I want you to do that too. Be police officers the community can trust. Be the ones who speak up when your colleagues violate rights. Be part of the change." After his speech, a young black woman approached him, a new agent, nervous but determined. "Captain Carter, I wanted to thank you. Because of experiences like your sister's, I almost didn't join the FBI. But cases like yours prove that accountability is possible, that good officers can make a difference." Maya smiled. "Then make that difference. Every day. In every interaction. In every decision. That's how we build the justice system we deserve." The evening before the first anniversary celebration of the Way, Maya and Nyla sat on their porch watching the sunset. Glenvale had visibly changed over the past year. More diverse families had moved in. More community events were held. Trust was slowly being rebuilt. "Do you ever regret it?" Nyla asked. "The struggle, I mean." "Everything." Maya thought carefully. "No. It was hard. It was exhausting. Sometimes it was scary. But it was necessary. Branson terrorized you. Shaw helped him. If we hadn't stood up to them, they would have kept doing it. Now they're in prison. Reforms have been made, and this community is safer. It was worth the fight." "What about you? How are you?" "I'm better. I still have nightmares about the war sometimes. But I also dream about the opening of the road, Thor being in the shelter, all those victims finally having their voices heard. Alongside the hard times, there are good memories too." Nyla leaned on her sister's shoulder. "Thank you for running to help me that day, for teaching me to resist, for not letting them make me invisible. You were never invisible. You were always strong. You just needed to know it." As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, they could see lights along Nyla's path. Solar-powered lamps formed a ribbon of light. People were walking, running, living freely on public land that truly belonged to everyone. Officer Rick Branson was serving the first year of his 18-year sentence. Chief Daniel Shaw was serving the first year of his 20-year sentence. Thor was playing with retired military K9s in the North Carolina mountains, and Glenvale was healing. Slowly, not perfectly, but sincerely. The fight for justice never truly ended. There would always be new battles, new challenges, new systems to dismantle and rebuild. But tonight, in this moment, Maya and Nyla could rest knowing they had made a difference. One path, one community, one victory. And sometimes, that was enough.